time for Dirt Daily, and today we're talking beadlocks. We have done videos on beadlocks countless times. If you've watched Dirt Everyday Extras or Dirt Every Day, you've seen us put together beadlocks, and you may not even know what they are or have never even heard of them before if you haven't seen those shows. So let's start from the top. What is a beadlock and what do we care? Well, the way a beadlock works is you have your wheel and you have a ring, and the ring clamps the tire to the wheel. And you want that because when you go off-roading, you want to air down your tires. Normal tires will stay on a wheel to around 12 to 15 psi. There are special wheels that have like grips built into the wheel, and those you can air down even more. But the nice thing about a beadlock wheel is you can really air down extremely low, like 1 psi, and it'll usually hold the tire on the rim. There's always a chance it might fall off on the inner bead, but that's something that we'll get to later. So, how does this work and why do we care? Well, when you're off-roading and you air down your tires, you don't want the tires to fall off the wheel, because then you have to jack up the Jeep or truck or rock crawler or whatever you're driving, and you got to get it back on the bead and you got to put air back in it, and if you don't have a jack or an air compressor or tools, it's going to be a big mess. So you want beadlocks if you're going off-road. Now I will preface this with saying these wheels have some instructions here, and right at the bottom, warning, converting this wheel to true beadlock configuration is for off-road use only. On-road use is not permitted. So there you go, there's your rules. I'm not going to worry about that right now. We're going to talk about wheels. These are the wheels that I'm using. These are a 17 by 8.5. It's a wheel from Mopar. It's a 5-on-5 bolt pattern with just about a 5 1/4 back spacing, which means from this rim to where the wheel attaches to the axle is 5 1/4 inches. 17-inch diameter, 8.5 wide. Now, what's cool about this wheel is just like every other wheel that you put on your Jeep. It has, the tire sits here and it sits here and then fills up with air. And it has these little safety beads. That's what like almost every truck and Jeep and 4x4 and car wheel has. It looks like this. But this one also has a ring right here. And this is kind of what we call in the industry a beauty ring or a protection ring, because this is something that you can hit on rocks, or if it scratches it from scratching into a curb, you can take it off and change it. But we go farther with this, because when you take a wheel like that and you remove that beauty ring, you can see there's all these threaded holes. And what's cool about all these threaded holes is that you can add this ring. And this is your beadlock ring. This actually clamps the tire. If you look closely, you can see all the little serrations out here in this edge. That is used where it clamps the tire. And when that bolts on here, there's a gap right there, and that gap is where it pinches the tire bead and allows you to air down the tires for better off-road use. This is what it looks like when it's all done. That is a beadlock ring on the same wheel that you could get from the factory, but then you can add this beadlock ring. You actually move the tire. You can see my hand here. This is where the tire would normally sit, and you have to move it out to there. Or in my case, we're going to just mount them so it starts out there, and then we're going to bolt these beadlock rings on. So this tire probably has 30 psi in it right now. It does have the tire pressure monitors, which I'll show you how I'm going to install those. And we're going to put a tire on a beadlock, and then everybody will learn how to do it, and you can do it at home. Let's get some tools. The very first step on putting any tire and wheel combo together is to put your valve stem in. Because if you put your tire on your wheel without putting the valve stem in, you're going to have to take the tire back off the wheel to get the valve stem out. Now this is the valve stem that I got from my local Mopar dealer, also known as the Jeep dealer. And this little guy is $100. Luckily, the Jeep already had 4 of these in the other tires, and I had those removed and reused them, so I really only had to buy 1 new one. You can picture if you had to buy 5 new tire pressure monitors, that would be $500. So now I also bought this tool, which is, you get it like your local auto parts store or tire store. It's basically a piece of metal with a little threaded kind of socket type thing at the end, and that threads into the valve stem. So that's what it's going to look like, but you actually want to thread it in after this is protruding through the wheel. And you're going to want a little bit of this. This is just what I call soapy water. I just put a little on there, not a whole lot. And that's because this valve stem is going to protrude through the wheel, and you can see right there where it has like a little step. That is what is going to sit in the opening of the wheel. So this is rubber over metal, and this part has like the battery powered monitor that talks to the computer in your Jeep. So this part that's rubber, you're going to want to lubricate that up a little bit with some soapy water. Put a little on there. Slide this up through the hole, and then take the tool and thread it on there. This is how this is going to look. The tire pressure monitor will sit up inside here like this. The tool will screw through that hole into the valve stem. And then you can just slowly sort of pry down on this, and that will pull up in. Then just come back up here and unscrew this. Valve stem is in. Don't forget to hold onto your valve stem caps. They're always good to keep mud and stuff out of your valve stems. Once you get that valve stem in with the tire pressure monitor, but you don't have to use a tire pressure monitor if you don't want to. I'm just putting them on the Jeep because I kind of don't want any lights on the dash. I know you can get a programmer and get rid of the tire pressure monitor, but at the end of the day, like, why not have a tire pressure monitor if you have the little sensors? And I've also found out, supposedly, the tire pressure monitors off of a Gladiator are different than the ones off of a Wrangler. So I had some Gladiator wheels, and I was like, stoked, I'm just going to pull those out. Apparently, they don't communicate. So double check with your tire shop or your dealership to make sure you're getting the right tire pressure monitors if you want to deal with them at all. If you don't, you're going to probably either have a flashing light on your dash, which one of my trucks does, and I just ignore it, or you'll have to get some sort of programmer to ignore all tire pressure monitoring things. So the next step, we're going to remove this beauty ring. This is held on with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 bolts. And they're Torx bolts, which means they have this kind of star-shaped impact to remove them. So you want to seat that in there good and press down on it well, because you don't want that to spin or that'll mess up the bolt, and then you're going to have trouble getting it out. Sounds like my impact is almost dead. These also look like they have some blue Loctite on them. So somebody at the factory didn't want these to fall off. All right, you want to keep these bolts. You're not going to reuse them. Actually, I don't know why you're keeping them, but I guess I'm keeping them. You should keep yours too. And then if we ever need them, we'll know that each of us has some. Be gone, beauty ring. We're not here for good looks. We got more good looks than anybody can handle. Next step, we're going to put the tire on the wheel, and then we're going to start putting the new beadlock ring on the wheel to hold the tire on it. Time for a brief intermission, and I'm going to tell you a little story. It's a story about a man that I know or knew. He's a man that would show up when I used to do my TV show called Dirt Every Day. And his name was Sound Ben. Now, Sound Ben was a man from a distant land. We'll call it Oregon. And Sound Ben, he wasn't there all the time. He would just only show up now and then, usually when we were really getting wild, like when we were launching up some boulders or shooting off a dune or smashing through some snow. Like Sound Ben would be there listening, hearing everything we did, listening to the engine, listening to the tires, listening to us like sing and tell jokes and just argue. Like Sound Ben was always there, quietly listening in to hear everything. And like to see Sound Ben, you wouldn't really know what was going on, because he kind of looked like a mixture between a guy that would work in a concession for like a baseball game. He had like this contraption he'd wear out on the front of him, and you'd think he would be like popcorn, cold beer, hot dogs, but in fact it was like a DJ. He had all these dials and knobs and turntables and gauges, and then he had this giant fishing rod, but the end of the fishing rod wasn't a fish, wasn't for catching fish. It had this giant fuzzy teddy bear poof stick thing. And Sound Ben, he's the guy that listened in. He's the guy that heard all the magic and made it come together to be the music, the background of the show. He was the guy that recorded everything. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because last night I shot this epic Grammy Award winning saga of me putting tires on beadlocks. And it was awesome. It had like every scene thought out, and it had every shot figured out, and it was perfectly timed and tuned. And I woke up this morning and I was like, I'm going to edit that thing, and it's going to be amazing. The fans that watch the channel will not have anything to complain. They'll be like, this is the best episode of Dirt Daily we've ever seen. And I got up and I started going through the clips, and I got about halfway through and there was no sound. Like the first half had bad sound, clicking and popping, and then the second half, zero sound. And I was just like, what happened? Why do I not have any sound on my show? Where is Sound Ben now to help me? Well, I think what happened was the microphone wire broke, or the little transmitter battery died. I don't know. Like I changed it out. I have a new wire, I have a new transmitter. Hopefully it's all perfect. The part that's a real bummer is that I had this cool closer where I was like wrapping it up, and then Baxter, my dog, walked out, and it was like perfectly timed for me to leave and take him for a walk, and it just looked great. It just doesn't have any sound. So I can either like try to write out all of the words or do voiceover, but I'm not going to do any of that, because luckily for you guys, I have one more tire and one more wheel, and I'm going to put that tire on that wheel and reshoot the whole second half of the video. So there you go. That's the story of Sound Ben. Oh, and the reason we called him Sound Ben wasn't because he was the sound guy. It was because we had another guy on the shoot already whose name was Ben, He was a cameraman, but we didn't think to call him Cameraman Ben. We just called him Ben. And then when this sound guy showed up, we were like, well, I guess you're Sound Ben. Miss you, Sound Ben. I hope everything's good down there in the far-off lands of New Oregon. It's time to get back to work. It's been a few days since I had my dreams of Academy Awards crushed when my video got messed up. But I still have a tire and a wheel that I need to put together, and I still have a chance to save this video. So let's do this thing. The very next step is to put the wheel into the tire. And one thing that you're going to want to notice is that the wheel has a valve stem right here, and the tire also has something called a little yellow dot right there. Most new tires have these. You want to line that little yellow dot up with the valve stem. There's usually only one little yellow dot on one side of the tire. This one has it on this side. So that means that this side will be the outside, and it will be on the same side as the valve stem, or the same location. So what I want to do is I want to lube up the back of the tire and push the wheel in from the back so that the wheel kind of actually lives halfway in the tire and halfway out. And then on the far side is where the beadlock ring will go. So I refilled the soapy bottle, and what we do here is we just put some soapy water. This is just, I think it's Dawn dish detergent. And you really only want to put it on the back side. You don't need to put it on both sides for now. So we're just going to put that on and then lay this down. And then we want to put the wheel into this. And you want to be careful, as much careful as you can, to not damage the tire pressure sensor. So I'm actually going to put that in first, press the wheel down in there, and then grab these. These are tire spoons. They're like pry bars, but the ends are kind of rounded off. They're basically like the butter knife of pry bars. So you want to get this, and you're going to reach inside between the tire and wheel and kind of pry the bead up and over the tire, or over the wheel. Pry the tire bead over the wheel so that it starts working its way around. So you can see half of the wheel is kind of pressed down into the tire and half of it isn't. So we want to use our tire spoons, and you kind of work the spoon down inside there, and then you sort of pry the tire bead around. And you want to be careful that it doesn't start backing off on this side. So you might actually want to put 2 tire spoons in, and sometimes you have to kind of put them in one way, get them in there and roll them over, bring them back out. Tire stores have a machine to do this. I'm not a tire store, I'm just a machine. Not really a machine, but you know. And then you just kind of work this thing around here. Don't put your finger right here, because when it snaps over, the tire spoon can slap up against the edge of the rim. Your finger's right there, you'll catch it. Also, don't put your face here. You need a good looking face to make a living. I think we're down to one more. So we'll come. Oh man, I'm really fighting it today. Here we go. We're going to come right in here. And when I pry this up, the wheel will fall down in. Boom. Success. Now remember, yellow spot goes with the valve stem. So we'll roll this over, and we'll see, here's our yellow spot, here's our valve stem. So we'll roll this around a little so that the valve stem lines up with the yellow spot. The next step you're going to want a bucket. You guys remember this bucket? This is the bucket that was full of biodiesel that I put in that engine. We have to go check on that engine. And put that bucket under the wheel, and you basically want to set the whole program up on the bucket. And the reason you do that is because you basically want the tire to kind of drape over the wheel. So kind of lift up the tire, get it centered on there, and don't forget that yellow dot lined up with the valve stem. The next step of the game, you want a couple flathead screwdrivers, and there's a lip on this wheel that has the bolt holes in it, and then it kind of steps down and out, and where it steps down and out is where you want the bead of the tire to sit. So you're going to go basically work your way around the wheel and get that tire to just sit right down in there. Sometimes tires really fight you on this stage. Other times they drop right on. It's because the manufacturing is a little bit different for different tire companies and also for different wheels. I have even gone so far as to like hit the inside bead of the tire with like a flap disc or like a sanding disc on a grinder and just kind of buzz like a 1/16 or less off of the tire, just a hair off of it so that it'll sit down onto the rim better. This one's looking pretty good. So next step, we're going to get ready to put the beadlock ring on the wheel and clamp this all together. Here's one thing that I really like about these Mopar wheels. Most of the time when you get a beadlock wheel, they're running these little 5/16 bolts to hold the beadlock ring to the wheel. And this is what I'm talking about. This is the beadlock ring, and it goes on top of the wheel. It actually bolts on through these holes, and you can see on this side that texture that I was just talking about where it grabs onto the tire and holds it in place. So you need hardware to bolt that on. Now, a lot of times it's this little stuff, 5/16. And sometimes people send you with 5/16 that isn't even grade 8. Not my favorite. 5/16 is okay, but I prefer, like anything, when you're off-road, when you have the security of bigger parts, you usually feel better. Not always needed, but makes you feel good. Then some of them come with 3/8 bolts, which obviously a little bit bigger than 5/16. 5/16, 3/8. You can see it's bigger right there. The Mopar wheels actually come with these 10mm bolts, which is actually a little bit bigger than the 3/8, plus they have an integrated washer already built on top that you won't lose. And that, most of the time you have to put a washer on each one of these or underneath each one before you put it together. So I really like the hardware selection for the Mopar bolts. Next, before you put any of these bolts on, you want to put anti-seize on it. The wheels are aluminum, they have threaded holes. Some wheels have steel inserts, these do not. And between the steel bolts and the aluminum wheels, it's nice to have some anti-seize to keep it from seizing or binding or whatever. I've been using this stuff recently, which I'm a big fan of. It's Permatex anti-seize lubricant in a spray can. When it's new, it usually works great. When it's a can that's a few months old like this, it kind of gets all gunked up in the hose. So you have to spend a lot of time shaking the hose, shaking the can. You have to spend a lot of time shaking the can before you can spray it on the bolts. And then when it does come out, it's kind of just like, after shaking this can up for way too long, it is still barely dripping out. And you want to get anti-seize on the threads, especially down where they start, because that's where, when it goes into the hole, you want to be careful that nothing gets cross-threaded. And this is just a helpful lubricant for that. You can also use the regular old style that comes in a can with a little brush. I have used both over the years and they both work. The spray can was getting really helpful when you want to do a whole bunch of bolts at once, but for some reason that stuff doesn't seem to last. It like gets clogged up in the can and needs a little bit of refinement there, Permatex. Oh, and anti-seize is super messy. So fully expect to look like the Tin Man by the time you're done. All right, let's bolt this thing together. This is all the bolts. Now, a lot of beadlocks, the ring is just plain. This one has kind of these cool rock cutter indentions. And also notice, it might look universal from this side, but if you turn it over, there's a spot right here that is cut out. That's going to line up with the valve stem right here, which remember is lined up with that yellow spot. So let's line that up. And then you're going to want to grab 4 of these bolts that are covered in anti-seize. I usually put one right beside the valve stem to start. And you just want to get it started in the hole. Let's see there. You might have to shift the ring around a little bit until it gets started. Then go directly across. And get that one started. Now you know that the ring is lined up with all the holes. So then come at like 9 o'clock and again over here at 3 o'clock. And remember, you're just getting these things started by hand. You want to make sure that they're going into the threads. And then just work your way around in between each one. Just get them started by hand. Remember, you're screwing a beefy, probably grade 8 style bolt into aluminum. And the last thing you want to do is get it cross-threaded, because most likely the bolt won't be cross-threaded. It will be the hole that's cross-threaded, and then you will have a problem with your wheel. So let's just go around. We'll get each one of these started by hand. And fill up. These wheels have 24 bolt holes. Some wheels have more, some wheels have less. It all kind of depends on the brand. I don't know that, I'm sure every beadlock wheel engineer and designer has a theory about why more or less is better. I think we're doing pretty good. I'm not completely covered in anti-seize. Oh, maybe a little bit. All right, all of these are started. We're going to get this mess out of the way. And we're back now with the impact. Now, the impact on a beadlock is a point of contention. Most instructions and companies say do not use an impact, just put it in by hand and torque them down to spec. I feel that this impact in particular, this little Milwaukee, has multiple settings, and the number 1 setting is pretty low torque, like to the point where I can almost stop it with my hand. And all I want to do here is, starting right by the valve stem, is just run them down. I'm not, no ugga-dugga-duggas, just like get them to go in. And do it, you kind of want to just tap it at first to make sure that it's driving down in. Yep. Just do a couple in different parts of the wheel. Over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, over here. I don't like how that one sounds, but it's going together good. Okay, next I'm gonna run all of these down, zigzag again, until I get like 1 or 2 ugga-duggas out of this, which is just like the little clutch stopping. Remember, I'm still on the lowest torque setting on this machine. Do not do this with your air-powered half-inch drive. Now, we'll go up 1 click to number 2, and we'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just a quick little burst. Okay. Next, I grab the torque wrench, I grab the instructions just to double check with everything. And the way Mopar describes this is torque the bolts to 15 foot-pounds, then torque the bolts to 26 foot-pounds, and then torque them to 37. I've already run them down with the impact. I've got them full, like I feel like it's holding in place really well. It's centered. So now we will go through and torque everything to 37. We'll see how far off we were with the impact. They feel like they were probably just shy. We're putting about 4 or 5 pulls. Whoops. That one's tight. 1, 2, 3. I'll come over here. One, two. I've torqued all the bolts. I zigzagged around, then I went all the way around. Everything's torqued down to spec. Next, we're gonna put some air on this thing. We're gonna air up this tire. The way the tire works is on the back side of the tire, there's the bead of the tire, but then there's what's called a safety bead. And the way, like if you think about the back of the tire, in fact, let me just see if I can show you. This is the bead of the wheel, and then inside here, where my finger is, there's like a smaller little bump in the wheel. And you want this back bead of the tire to hop over that safety bead and get to the outer bead of the wheel. Then it's kind of holding it from popping off, which is the main bead, but it's also holding it from popping in, which is that safety bead. Some wheels have really big safety beads, some wheels don't have any safety bead. This wheel has a pretty good one. So we're gonna stand this thing up back on the bucket. And what we'll do now is we'll put air in here, and as the tire expands, it'll push that back sidewall of the tire until it pops over that safety bead. And different tires have tighter and looser beads. So this might take 10 PSI to pop over that bead, it might take 40. Here's the other thing to remember. When you're airing up a tire on a beadlock, you're basically pushing the tire, the pressure is pushing the tire up against this bead, and it's wanting to pop this ring off. Now we have 24 big 10mm bolts in here. They're all torqued down to 37 to 40 foot-pounds of torque. It shouldn't go anywhere, but I have heard horror stories of, especially like homemade beadlocks, where the welds break and this ring will pop off and people will get injured. So when I'm airing up a beadlock wheel, I try to only use one hand to hold the hose on there. Even better if this was like a clip-on style. So I should probably get one. And also, don't put your face right here, because if this thing blows off, it's going to ruin your moneymaker and you're going to be out of luck and never get that GQ cover model job that you were hoping for. So just be safe, I guess is the name of the game. I'm guessing, based on the other wheels and other tires, that it will pop on at about 24 PSI. So sometimes it'll make a loud bang when it pops on. Sometimes it'll just go bloop when it pops over that safety bead. Barely even registering yet. This is a 37. Imagine what it takes to get like those big 46 and 54 inch tall tires onto a bead. That's why a lot of times when you saw us on the show, we would have to use some sort of explosion to get the tires to seat. This is much safer. Oop. Starting to show in the little valve, the little gauge on the compressor kicked on. So these tires are Falken Wild Peak MTs. I got a 37 1250 for a 17-inch wheel. These tires, I've run them in the 38-inch size many times with good luck. I've never run the 37s, so I'm excited to try these out. I went down from 38s to 37s for noob sock because I'm going to run a smaller axles than I do on my diesel Jeep tube sock. And because I kind of just wanted to try a little Jeep with little tires. All right, we are almost to 30 PSI and I've not heard that bead pop yet. We are at 30 PSI. Let's see, did it pop on and we just didn't notice it? Yes. So if you look at the back of the tire, it has seated on all the way up to the edge of the rim. So there we go. We now have 5 beadlocks mounted. You take a little breather here until this compressor stops running. There we go. The bead locks are mounted. All 5 tires are mounted. I'm going to run these down to a tire shop and see if they can balance them for me. Even though, as it says in the instructions, these tires are illegal to drive on the street. So that's it for this Dirt Daily. I'm really sorry I didn't get to use that closing scene where Baxter came in and like wrapped up the show with me. Maybe I'll just throw it in at the end just anyways. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you guys next time. We got a Jeep to build.